Saint Augustine commentary on the Gospel of John chapter 6 verse 60 to 72, Tractatus 27. We have just heard out of the Gospel the words of the Lord which follow the former discourse. From these the discourse is due to your ears and minds, and it is not unseasonable today. For it is concerning the body of the Lord, which he said that he gave to be eaten for eternal life. And he explained the mode of this bestowal and gift of his, in what manner he gave his flesh to eat, saying, He that eats my flesh and drinks my blood dwells in me, and I in him. The proof that a man has eaten and drank is this: if he abides and is abided in, if he dwells and is dwelt in, if he adheres so as not to be deserted. This then he has taught us and admonished us in mystical words, that we may be in his body, in his members, under himself as head, eating his flesh, not abandoning our unity with him. But most of those who were present, by not understanding him, were offended. For, in hearing these things, they thought only of flesh, that which themselves were. But the Apostle says what is true. To be carnally minded is death. Romans chapter 7 verse 6. The Lord gives us his flesh to eat, and yet to understand it according to the flesh is death. While yet he says of his flesh that therein is eternal life. Therefore, we ought not to understand the flesh carnally, as in these words that follow. Many therefore, not of his enemies but of his disciples, when they had heard this, said, This is a hard saying, who can hear it? If his disciples accounted this saying hard, what must his enemies have thought? And yet so it behoved that to be said which should not be understood by all. The secret of God ought to make men eagerly attentive, not hostile. But these men quickly departed from him, while the Lord said such things. They did not believe him to be saying something great and covering some grace by these words. They understood just according to their wishes and in the manner of men that Jesus was able or was determined upon this, namely, to distribute the flesh with which the word was clothed, piecemeal as it were, to those that believe on him. This, say they, is a hard saying. Who can hear it? But Jesus, knowing in himself that his disciples murmured at it, for they so said these things with themselves, that they might not be heard by him. But he who knew them in themselves, hearing within himself, answered and said, This offends you, because I said, I give you my flesh to eat and my blood to drink. This forsooth offends you. Then what if you shall see the Son of Man ascending where he was before? What is this? Did he hereby solve the question that perplexed them? Did he hereby uncover the source of their offense? He did clearly, if only they understood. For they supposed that he was going to deal out his body to them, but he said that he was to ascend into heaven, of course, whole. When you shall see the Son of Man ascending where he was before, certainly then, at least, you will see that not in the manner you suppose does he dispense his body. Certainly then, at least, you will understand that his grace is not consumed by tooth biting. And he said, it is the Spirit that quickens, the flesh profits nothing. Before we expound this, as the Lord grants us, that other must not be negligently passed over, where he says, then, what if you shall see the Son of Man ascending where he was before? For Christ is the Son of Man, of the Virgin Mary. Therefore, Son of Man, he began to be here on earth, where he took flesh from the earth. For which cause it was said prophetically, truth is sprung from the earth. Psalm 85, verse 12. Then, what does he mean when he says, when you shall see the Son of Man ascending where he was before? For there had been no question if he had spoken thus, if you shall see the Son of God ascending where he was before. But since he said, the Son of Man ascending where he was before, surely the Son of Man was not in heaven before the time when he began to have a being on earth. Here indeed he said where he was before, just as if he were not there at this time when he spoke these words. But in another place he says, no man has ascended into heaven, but he that came down from heaven, the Son of Man who is in heaven. John chapter 3, verse 13. He said not was, but, says he, the Son of Man who is in heaven. He was speaking on earth, and he declared himself to be in heaven. And yet he did not speak thus, no man has ascended into heaven, but he that came down from heaven, the Son of God, who is in heaven. Whither tends it but to make us understand that which even in the former discourse I commended to your minds, my beloved, that Christ, both God and man, is one person, not two persons, lest our faith be not a trinity, but a quaternity. Christ therefore is one, the Word, soul and flesh, one Christ, the Son of God and Son of Man, one Christ, Son of God always, Son of Man in time, yet one Christ in regard to unity of person. In heaven he was when he spoke on earth. He was Son of Man in heaven in that manner in which he was Son of God on earth. Son of God on earth in the flesh, which he took, Son of Man in heaven in the unity of person. What is it then that he adds? It is the Spirit that quickens, the flesh profits nothing. Let us say to him, for he permits us, not contradicting him, but desiring to know, O Lord, good Master, in what way does the flesh profit nothing, while you have said, except a man eat my flesh and drink my blood, he shall not have life in him? Or does life profit nothing? And why are we what we are, but that we may have eternal life, which you do promise by your flesh? Thence, what does it mean the flesh profits nothing? It profits nothing, but only in the manner in which they understood it. They indeed understood the flesh, just as when cut to pieces in a carcass, or sold in the shambles, not as when it is quickened by the Spirit. Wherefore it is said that the flesh profits nothing, in the same manner as it is said that knowledge puffs up. Then, ought we at once to hate knowledge? Far from it. And what means knowledge puffs up? Knowledge alone without charity. Therefore he added, but charity edifies. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 verse 1. Therefore add you to knowledge charity, and knowledge will be profitable, not by itself but through charity. So also here the flesh profits nothing, only when alone. Let the Spirit be added to the flesh, as charity is added to knowledge, and it profits very much. For if the flesh profits nothing, the Word would not be made flesh to dwell among us. If through the flesh Christ has greatly profited us, does the flesh profit nothing? But it is by the flesh that the Spirit has done somewhat for our salvation. Flesh was a vessel. Consider that what it held, not what it was. The apostles were sent forth. Did their flesh profit us nothing? If the apostles' flesh profited us, could it be that the Lord's flesh should have profited us nothing? For how should the sound of the word come to us except by the voice of the flesh? Whence should writing come to us? All these are operations of the flesh, but only when the Spirit moves it as if it were its organ. Therefore, it is the Spirit that quickens, the flesh profits nothing. As they understood the flesh, but not so do I give my flesh to be eaten.